Welcome back. We're the Patriots of Faith. Tyler Cole.
I'm Jordan Wallace.
And we mentioned last segment that we were going to talk about the Baltimore riots, devote a whole segment to it. And do you have a little introduction for us, Jordan?
Of course, looking back, we know that a lot of this has all been started up here in the last week or so. It's all been kind of breaking out in the last week, but it all started, I guess it was last week when a young man, I have to remember what his name was. Freddie Gray. With all the whole shuffle of what's going on in Baltimore in the last week, it's hard to remember what all caused it to begin with. Yeah, well, Freddie Gray was taken to police custody, but there's been reports go one way or another. Now, of course, we know that there's 6 police officers been charged with homicide, if I'm not mistaken, manslaughter. But there's also reports coming out that the young man was, there's even been witnesses that have said that the young man was not injured in police custody. So it's kind of hard to figure out who's right on that.
I think it was maybe CNN. I was just happened to be out eating the other day, and I saw it on the TV screen. But there were reports coming out that he may have actually hurt himself in prison.
Right.
So that's something that could be a possibility. But the thing is, before the facts even came out, before we even knew what was going on with Freddie Gray, there was all these riots. And that's worrisome that people will automatically jump to these conclusions. And because of that, these things will happen like what we see in Baltimore and what we've seen in Ferguson.
Well, that's the thing. It's a lot like Ferguson, but this time it's in a major city, one of the nation's great colonial cities. It's been around for centuries now. And we saw what happened in Ferguson, where you've had all these folks. The interesting connection between the two as well is that we find that most of these folks doing the rioting and burning were not necessarily from those neighborhoods, but they came in from other communities. And there's even been professional anarchist groups that have kind of developed, and not just for this event, but they've been going on. They're trying to find what they can to topple the government, topple the law enforcement system, and everything else. And they're taking their opportunities like this to try to spread their message of destroying the system, so to speak. And it's been known that there's been a lot of folks that have been causing the damage that were not from those neighborhoods, but they have come from other states, other cities, and other communities as well to try to pretty much become professional lawbreakers or professional troublemakers, so to speak, in a lot of ways. But there's no reason why you should jump to conclusions on these things, and there's no reason why either that you should burn private property and harm innocent people that had nothing to do with the situation at hand that you're supposed to be protesting.
No, I don't. If you believe in, if you believe that, you know, your particular group doesn't have the rights that they deserve, I don't have a problem with somebody peacefully protesting
Absolutely.
about that. But when you go so far as to burn down people's private property, to even maybe kill people, to do all these criminal things, you should be charged as a criminal. It's criminal behavior.
One thing that's really concerning too is now that we know who some of these folks are, because there has been so much television footage and even the security camera footage. There's a lot of security camera footage that came out of Ferguson, and also even in Baltimore from liquor stores and all these other places. The police have the ability, the FBI and other folks have that ability to do visual confirmation on who these folks were that caused these crimes, and they should be charged. They should track these people down and charge them, because now that they don't track them down, now these folks feel like anytime this happens, they can just do the same thing again. It's happened now twice in Ferguson and Baltimore, where folks have pretty much burned. In Baltimore, there was, I believe it was a $15 or $16 million senior center that was under construction, burned to the ground, multi-million dollars. You got CVS that was burned in Baltimore as well. I think it was up to almost a dozen businesses, Advanced Auto Parts and McDonald's and other places in Ferguson that were burned. And now folks feel like they can burn people's property, steal and loot people's property, and they can just do it, go home, and there won't be any repercussions. So as long as these events keep happening where the police and even the FBI to an extent don't get involved and track these criminals down, I mean, it's going to happen again before we know it.
We even saw police getting hurt There were at least, in the first confrontation, I believe there were at least 20 officers who were wounded. I don't know if there were any killed, but I know that there were at least 20 wounded, and what they were doing is throwing like giant rocks at them.
Yeah, it's cinder blocks and everything else.
And some officers were injured because of that. There were some, and they were basically standing out in the city, just a whole big group of police with their riot shields in a phalanx. And every once in a while, they might break their formation to arrest somebody who was who was out doing something. But for the most part, you just saw them standing there with their riot shields, just basically looking like they were just defending themselves. So it was a very dangerous situation over in Baltimore.
And it's been there's been several solid sources that have come out now on radio and television from the police department there, and they've been told, or they told the programs they were on, that the mayor put out the stand down order, told the chief of police in Baltimore that for it sounds like for politically correct reasons, they wanted the officers to stand down and not to advance. And a lot of police officers in Baltimore have expressed a lot of frustration because the mayor seems to be putting political expediency or political correctness above the safety even of her own officers in order to tell them to stand down. And she even ordered them to back off in those situations. I don't know how you could be a mayor and to be that derelict in your duty, because you're, as mayor, just like any other officer, whether you're president, whether you're governor, or whatever else. One of your top objectives, one of your top duties is to protect the safety of the people that work for you in your departments, but also the safety of the general public as well. And that mayor in Baltimore did not do those things. So, I mean, I don't know, in Maryland, I don't know if they have a recall system like they do in Wisconsin, California, and other states, but if Maryland has a recall system, I would urge people of Baltimore, of course they probably won't, but if they do have that system, I would urge them to recall that mayor. I'd give her a vote of no confidence. I don't think she's been doing her duty.
And as President Obama actually mentioned in his speech, which, by the way, even if you don't agree with President Obama on a lot of things, I think the speech he gave on those riots was actually a very, very good one. And one of the things he talked about in that speech, these riots crippled an already crippled community. And made things even worse. And that just goes to show that violence, rioting, things like that, they'll never make things better. They always cause bad things to happen.
One of the most frustrating things I've seen come out of this, too, it's actually come from the point now where the issues with Gray and stuff like that, those have almost been pushed to the side. It's almost the rioting in Baltimore and the response in Baltimore has now become, and the response across the country, now Philadelphia and Cincinnati, there were protests on Thursday night, I believe it was. But now it's gone from that story about Gray to now these protests. But one of the biggest narratives and the biggest thing I have with this whole thing that frustrates me is this whole idea. They're now calling this term socioeconomic oppression, where they believe that the man that white people and that corporate America are intentionally trying to suppress the black folks, African American folks, and it's far from the truth. I mean, maybe there might be a few scattered folks out there, but a city like Baltimore, I mean, you look at the mayor is black, and you've got the city council, and they're all Democrats, and a lot of them are black, as well as all their federal and state representatives for the most part. Elijah Cummings is one of the congressmen. He comes from Baltimore. You got the state senate president in Maryland is from Baltimore, and they're all black. So I mean, these are the folks that are their local leaders in that area. So are we going to say that the black people there in Baltimore are suppressing their own people? I highly doubt that. So it's real frustrating to see that they're trying to take this narrative and trying to make it a racial issue as well by saying that their underdevelopment, their economic issues and everything else are caused because folks around the country that tend to be white are trying to suppress them economically. I find that far from the truth.
Now, it could be that they're still trying to recover from when they were actually oppressed, like maybe in the George Wallace days. I don't know,
Yeah,
but I mean, it's a long-standing issue. It's been a long a long process giving them the rights that they have. And so maybe there are some things that are left over. I know that in the black community, things are a lot worse. And I really am not sure exactly what the reason for that is. There could be a variety of them.
And a lot of it goes back to individual responsibility, too, because you see folks, like we were just talking about Herman Cain before the show. Herman Cain, you got Bill Cosby, even got Ben Carson. We just talked about him now on the verge of running for president here on Monday. These folks came from that setup. Bill Cosby's from Philadelphia. Ben Carson's from Detroit. And you've got Herman Cain. I think he grew up in Atlanta. But these folks have come from situations where they grew up in urban areas. And even in the case of Ben Carson, he grew up in urban poverty. He had several siblings, and his mom forced him to read, forced him to get an education, that sort of thing. But a lot of this issue goes back, it stems back to parental guidance, it stems back to individual responsibility and those other issues as well.
I went to inner city Nashville back in March last year, and I'm not saying at all that this is all a black people thing. This is the thing that everybody should that applies to everybody. But what I saw was that a lot of the children there were in these really poverty-stricken communities, were basically starving with their parents never at home. Not necessarily, in some cases, but not necessarily because they were working, but because maybe they were out at the bar or they were out dealing drugs, something like that, and their children were home starving. And yet you see a lot of these very nice cars parked in the driveways, which really got me to thinking about something is not being done right. So I really don't. I'm not sure what the solution to these problems.
Well, my wife too. Of course, she works at Kroger, and she sees the food stamps issue firsthand. She gets frustrated because she sees a lot of these folks that will come into the line and they'll use food stamps, but they'll get some nice stuff, 2 steaks and everything else. But then they're also paying cash for lottery tickets, or they're paying cash for cigarettes or for alcohol, that sort of thing as well too. So that goes also back to that personal accountability issue. Sure, you may get enough in food stamps to cover those things, but why on earth are you also getting tobacco and alcohol products as well too? Because I mean that's one of those things that you can be personally accountable for the resources you have, but a lot of folks don't turn out to be that way. What's our time on that now?
We have about 2 minutes left, it looks like.
Another aspect of this too, of course, Baltimore has been placed in the nation's eye this week, and one of the confirmations, we've known this time after time, but one of the confirmations it puts out is that it proves that these leftists, they call them progressive policies, but they're really not all that progressive after all. I mean, you don't just look at Baltimore, you look at Detroit. Detroit's been in the same situation where you've got one-party rule, Democratic Party rule, throughout the entire situation. They're pushing all this constantly tax and spend policies. You got Detroit, you got Chicago, Philadelphia, New Orleans, and San Francisco, St. Louis, name the city. And if you have the city where the mayor, the city council, virtually all government officials, if they're leftist Democrats, the policies they push through, they end up destroying jobs, weakening law enforcement, and running up massive spending. That's what leads to the inner city poverty. We're talking about trying to find a solution, but that leads to this inner city poverty. I would call it the socio-economic oppression of bloated government and control. The government's trying to take control, and it's that vicious cycle of government trying to take more of your resources to try to give you back, so to speak. They try to give you back different perks and welfare and that sort of thing. And it's the oppression of on the job creator and the worker alike, as well as on the taxpayer, because the more the money they're taking from businesses, the more they're taking from individuals, you have less money to invest in the community, less money to give to charity, less money to grow businesses to create jobs as well. So it's not socioeconomic oppression as much as it is government oppression on the worker and on the job creator. So that's one of the other issues that seem to come to the public eye out of all this.
Well, we've brought out some different points, and you can agree or disagree with them, but these are just some ideas on our thoughts on this issue. We are the Patriots of Faith, and we will return next set.